You're listening to Arsenal Pass, a flesh and blood podcast for players by players. And all about strategy, leveling up, and the latest news in the world of Wraith. Welcome to Arsenal Pass.
No worries.
Brendan, do you have a favorite card from Dynasty so far?
Favorite card. I don't know. I think that our spoiler card might be my favorite card because it's maybe one of the most powerful cards ever printed. I think that the more I think about that card and revisit it, the more I'm just like, why is this not an on-hit trigger? Why is this just inherent? Pulse Wave Harpoon I think is fundamentally above rate because I watched that math video recently, actually. I don't know if you saw it. It was like an hour long. They broke down the math. They talked about the magic value or the magic number of 8. Pulse Wave Harpoon's ability is actually valued at 1 point out of 8, which it definitely is far above that. You get full information on the hand. You get to take a key card out of the hand. It's just so good. And I think we'll lead into that when we talk about the Battle Hardened Philly results where Dash performed quite well.
Spoiler alert. Yeah. No, I actually saw that video as well. It's so funny being a Welcome to Wraith boomer. I was watching this video being like, okay, I'm ready for what's the big groundbreaking, but it's so funny. I think just that video really breaks down well what is kind of fundamental to this game. It's funny. They talk about like the rule of 8, or they're talking about like adding up to 8. I've always known it as like the rule of 4 and the design principle of Flesh and Blood, but it's interesting to see the way they presented it. But like design and balancing of Flesh and Blood and the kind of design rules they use are really interesting. And I can't remember who posted that video, but it is out there, and I know it's been floating around, and I think those guys break it down really well. So cool, great to see. Welcome back to Arsenal Pass, episode 84, of course, next to my good buddy Brendan Patrick right here. Welcome to the show, of course. Caster extraordinaire. This week we're diving into Dynasty with Constructed. So Dynasty has now been out for almost a week. We had the Blitz events over the weekend. These super armories, these Dynasty armory events where they were giving out these cool Regicide promos. Managed to sag myself one, Brendan, actually, but I didn't go 4-0. I just got it through a lucky draw. So. And we're looking at, first of all, we're going to look at 5 classes. So we're going to break this into two-part episode. So next week will be the final 5 classes. This week we are looking at our warriors, our brutes, our wizards, our mechanologists, and our rangers, and looking at the impact Dynasty has for, where to start building decks, synergies, what cards are going to be the sort of standouts from the set, and where we think these classes might go in a new Dynasty meta, both across Class Constructed and Blitz. But first, Brendan Patrick, how was your week in Flesh and Blood?
Well, I took a little bit of a break from Flesh and Blood post Worlds. I had some stuff to sort of catch up on the real life side. Been doing a lot of traveling recently, so focusing on running, of course, which has been brutal but very rewarding. I think that today was a really key day for me. I did about 5.7 miles of trail running, so not on pavement or anything like that, and it's the route that I used to ride my mountain bike on for like a daily thing. I would say as recent as a month ago, to run that entire trail would have been something I probably would have considered to be impossible. So feels good to do that. And I can just see that I'm making a lot of progress. But yeah, not too much Flesh and Blood, to be honest. Was on the Instant Speed podcast with Flake DeMarco recently, which was a joy, of course. Really enjoy talking to that guy and enjoy casting with him even more. But yeah, excited to dig into Dynasty. I think it's a great set, much more akin to the Crucible of War era of Flesh and Blood rather than the Everfest, in my opinion.
Brendan, we got our wish. We talked about a lot about what we wanted from Dynasty. We even did a full Patreon pod about it, but we talked about it week after week in the lead up to Dynasty as we started the previous season, and we talked through kind of our thoughts and feelings as we started to see these first cards and the final set release, and just playing some games over the weekend. I'm impressed. I think my first take on Dynasty is good set. Let's see how it shakes out in the competitive meta, but from a gameplay standpoint and enjoyability, I just feel like when Crucible dropped, I felt like, wow, there's so much to explore. Like, where do I start? I felt overwhelmed, but like in a good way. And when Everfest came out, I didn't really have that same feeling, but I've got that feeling I have with Crucible of War again. This weekend I messed around with brutes, and then I was like, oh, but this, I saw other people doing other stuff, and I was like, I want to do that. I want to pulse wave harpoon. I want to hyperdrive and mechanoid suit my opponents, and I want to play wizard with the new cards and so many different things. So yeah, I played 2 of the armor events over the weekend. I actually, same as you, I planned to just not play any Flesh and Blood for 2 weeks, but Dynasty just got me riled up, Brendan. So I got out there, played Olivia in one and played Rhinar in the other. And look, it's safe to say that Rhinar hates me. So, probably going to have to put that down for a while, but, it's a story for another day. But I think I was really impressed with Olivia, actually, in Blitz, and I think it might be good in Class Constructed, but we'll get to that in this pod.
Yeah, I mean, Levia does have some of the highest expressed value of attack of any class in the game.
Yes, some of those cards don't defend though.
True, but I mean, technically, in the mind of Michael Hamilton, Wounded Bull also doesn't defend unless your opponent Arsenal Sync Below. Then it does start to defend.
All right, let's get into the news, Brendan. And Dynasty release weekend. If you haven't got your hands on Dynasty yet, it is now available on sale. I haven't heard too much about like this wave of product. In the past, obviously, we've had issues with distribution and supply chain challenges for Legend Story Studios with their distributors around the world and getting product into people's hands. From what I understand, it's not been as bad this time around. I think people have gotten the product they've wanted to get. Second waves are already with distributors, I understand, in terms of product hitting to stores. Distributors trying to get it out the door. But it also seemed like it was a pretty successful launch weekend and a lot of demand for the product. So it's going to be really interesting, I think, over the first month to see how people react to it, what people want. I mean, I'm hearing stuff about maybe some Majestics being short printed, which, I don't know if there's any basis to that. I think that's more of a hype and a meme thing. But alongside that, there was a lot of cards in the set. I myself opened, I think, ended up getting 2 cases. And I think didn't even open a bunch of the Majestics, just didn't see them. So is it over 50 Majestics in the set? There's a lot of cards in the set. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how people respond to opening product, secondary market, all those things.
Yeah, I've got a closet full of surgical extractions at this point. Yeah. I don't know. I have no idea if that's real or not, but it's all over Fab Twitter for what it's worth.
Yeah, I saw that. Well, yeah, I wanted to get my master set, so I bought everything over the weekend, and I think I paid $40 for surgical extraction. Because I just said to someone, I said, just give me the cards, and I'll pay you the TCG price or whatever. And then I was going through it, and I was like, 45. I didn't know about this. And I was like, 40. What is going on? And then later on that night on Twitter, I saw it, and I was like, I mean, whatever. But yeah, very, very interesting. It was one of the coolest things actually over the weekend playing games was people would play a card, and a lot of these cards have the names of Magic cards, and they were bringing and very prominent Magic cards as well. And they brought me back to actually playing games of Magic back in the day that I really enjoyed. I'm talking 6-7 years ago. Surgical Extraction in particular was a card that was quite prominent in the modern metagame and extended metagame. Skullcrack was a card that I discarded a few times to gain some resource. Does something completely different in Magic the Gathering, but brought back some memory. So I just thought that was kind of a cool aside over the weekend. Battle Hardened Philly. So the first Dynasty event did happen over the weekend, a Battle Hardened event and a PTI event on the Sunday, which did see, of course, Dynasty being played, and really interesting sort of top 8 from the Battle Hardened that saw 3 Dash, 2 Dramai, 2 Icelander, and a Bravo. No Briar, no Icelander. So their finals at the World Championships, we didn't see either of those heroes in the top 8. Ultimately, one of the Dash players taking it down. And yeah, I thought just interesting top 8 to see Dramai and Icelander in there, but also Dash. I mean, Dash does seem, we saw a lot of Hanabi Blaster decks being played at that event. I caught a small amount of the coverage. I know Ethan Van Sant was doing a bit of a stream. I caught a little bit, but I didn't see a lot of it. But I did hear from people sort of the deck list being played. There was some pretty crazy stuff going on with Hanabi Blaster and the Mech suit and things like that as well.
Yeah, I really do think that Mech might be one of the biggest winners in Dynasty. But if not, it has sort of the clearest, just strict upgrades with some cards, right? And Hanabi Blaster fits right into that Boost Dash deck. The Boost Dash deck got direct upgrades to things like Pulse Wave Harpoon. I think if you're looking at the entire set of Dynasty and you are potentially overwhelmed by all of the different choices there that are presented to you, and an aggressive dash deck is definitely something that you're going to see at least some success with, which is what we saw on the weekend.
Yeah, so I think it was Rose was the player who won. I think their deck had a lot of different. I think they might have had a hybrid as well in terms of. I saw Pistol at one point when I tuned in the top 8 match. So I think we've seen like but I think we'll talk about it when we get into the mech side. But there's so many cards in the set plus what you have existing for Dash, and again going back to that Crucible of War thing and what we're seeing with the set, just different avenues and different ways to play a deck, and maybe you can put 2 or 3 of those elements into one 80 card shell and be able to switch between them. So it's gonna be interesting. And then I think the PTI event on the second day was won by Brody Spurlock. I don't know what Brody was playing, but it's just canon at this point that Brody will top 8 probably every battle harden that he goes to. I think he was also in the top 8 on the Saturday as well.
I think he actually has maybe top 8 every single one.
Close to, yeah.
Maybe not Minneapolis, but I'm pretty sure every single other one. Maybe he's top 8 like either it's the main event or the Sunday event. But yeah, he's on a tear, definitely. he's actually a local as well. He's a local of mine too. So I knew him quite a while before he sort of burst onto the scene, playing all these battle hardens, and he's a local grinder. He plays like 6 to 7 armories a week.
Yeah. Well, congrats to Rose and to Brody for the big weekend. We did a 5K sub giveaway over the last week, and we talked about it last week. If you missed it, we asked for some sort of like comments, thoughts, reactions in the last episode that we did, and we had a few things to give away, including Brendan. I made sure I put it on. We've got one of these t-shirts that'll be in the pack, Arsenal Pass t-shirt. If you can see that myself and Brendan were seen wearing at the banquet on the Friday night, as well as over the PT weekend. There's a resource token, which we talked about those last week as well with Fab Metal tokens. We have done an Arsenal Pass resource token. I don't have one with me, Brendan, but I'll throw it up on the screen so you can see it. Those are now live for sale as well, up on Fab Metal tokens. Metal Fab tokens. Man, he's going to kill me for that. MetalFabTokens.com.
Yeah. I did it on Instant Speed the other day as well. He's like, where can you get these? I was like, Metal Fab tokens or Fab Metal tokens, one of them.
Fab's in the middle because of the logo. Yeah. Anyway, Metal Fab tokens, you can go pick those up. They're on sale now for everyone. And as well, in this pack, there is some Herald of Rebirths, playset of those, and a playmat and Arsenal Pass Brendan Patrick special life pad, which I think are pretty cool. So we've got 2 winners for that, Brendan. I'm going to bear with me. I'm going to grab their names. So our winners for the 5K sub giveaway and receiving these packs, please do drop us, either comment on this and just drop us. It's the best way to do this. Email us at arsenalpassfab@gmail.com with your shipping details, your full name, and we'll get these over to you. Also, let us know what size t-shirt you take. Caleb W is one of our winners, and Devin S. So thank you both for your comments, your kind comments and kind words. I think they're both about Brendan, actually. And his commentary, which, don't big him up too much. But yeah, congratulations to both our winners. Do get in touch with us so that we can get those out to you as soon as possible. And again, those tokens are available now. Brendan, just want to give a big shout out to our patrons. And we did actually throw up another Patreon Cyborg guide, courtesy of Chandler Toe, our Calling San Jose winner. I did a deck tech with Chandler, which you can now check out on the YouTube channel. We did that last week. Chandler, one of the nicest and coolest guys in Flesh and Blood, and I was really impressed. We sat down and did a deck tech, really impressed with his Rhino list and the thought process behind a lot of the cards in his Rhino list that ones I never considered myself, and how he put that list together and how he looked to play into different matchups. And his guide is very detailed as well. That's now up on Patreon. So go check that out. And big thanks to Chandler. What a guy. And we do also have the World Championships vlog that's on the way. Our World Championship video. It should be up in the next week or so. It's just an edit at the moment. And we will be doing something with Kano, just trying to find some time to do that. And we'd also like to know what videos you'd love to see us do. What Dynasty's out. What about deck techs, deck guides? Are there people you want us to get on? Please do give us your feedback. Drop in the comments on YouTube. Let us know who, what, where, when, why you would like for Arsenal Pass videos for the remainder of the year and into the new year. With Dynasty dropping, me and Brendan need to sit down and plan out what the rest of the year in January looks like. So opportunity to get your ideas in. Brendan, going to throw it over you for Fitness Challenge. Maybe give us those details again. And just for those who maybe missed it last week, what is happening with the Fitness Challenge in Feb?
Yeah, so it's February 19th. There is a marathon in Austin, Texas. There's a half marathon and 5K available. Heavily encourage you to get involved and come join us in Austin. So this one's a bit different from the last fitness challenge. There will be sort of a culminating event where people are meeting in person. Working on getting some other big content creators involved. I have a lot of verbal commitments, but I need the real commitments, specifically looking at Team Covenant. I wouldn't normally name the content creators, but because Steven is, he likes to ride that fence. If you guys want to shoot him a message and tell him to get his ass down here, that'd be great. Zach Bunn has verbally committed to me. Whether or not he was inebriated most of those nights, and when he committed, that's not my problem. So he said he's going to come, and working to try to get Flake out there as well. I think that it's a really cool because it is a lot of work to prepare for events like this. Running is not the best, but if we all get to meet in person, hang out for the weekend, and sort of cap this all off, I think it's going to be an awesome event. Hayden and I will work on the back end here soon enough to try to find some sponsors for that event and potentially raffle off some flights and accommodations, stuff like that. But yeah, everything is sort of chugging along as it is. And if you're interested in joining us on February 19th, I highly suggest you start training. If you want to see daily-ish updates from me, join the Arsenal Pass Patreon. Our Discord has a specific Discord channel from it. Most of our communication outside of text communication, is done on the Strava app. If you don't have that, it's the greatest fitness app ever created. I've used it every day for probably 4 to 5 years. And you can follow people, and it's like a social app for fitness, and it tracks literally everything. So recommend you check that out and join our little club on there.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, the fitness challenge has been ongoing in our Discord as well, which has been super awesome. I got to shout out a few people who recently have just sort of updated on their fitness journey post the Fab Fitness Challenge that happened earlier this year. And Zach, Marco, Tickler Foundry, Ian, there's just been some Tebow. There's been some amazing results that people have continued their journey, and some people have had honestly just fantastic results. So big shout out to those who have continued to not only have these results but inspire, I think, others in the channel and continue to motivate one another, which has been great to see. And I'm excited to see what happens in Jan-Feb post Christmas as well. So post after all the turkey and whatnot that I'll be eating, Brendan.
Yeah, still in the freezing cold weather though, unfortunately.
Well, it'll be hot over the side of the world. So onto the Command & Cookout. Brendan, speaking of food and firing up grills and Barbies in the summer, we got a great Command & Cookout question this week from Lucas Oswald, who this question actually came through Patreon. And Lucas says, well, I guess this is kind of a Command & Cookout question. You're right, it is, Lucas. But what are your thoughts on cards that will clearly need a banning in the future? I have 3 examples: Art of War, Belittle, and Stalagmite. Art of War and Belittle both break a tenet of the game, using cards and resources respectively. And Stalagmite into mini aggro decks can gain you ridiculous amounts of life. Into Runeblade, for example, consistently blocks 11, 2 Rosettas, and 3. See what you're saying there. Do you think cards like that will likely be banned with future heroes? Should be banned now, like Stubby Hammers, so the devs don't have to work with constraints of those types of broken cards? Brennan, got any thoughts on this? I have a lot of thoughts on this because I have a list of cards that I've kind of been running since the start of Flesh and Blood that I've always thought would potentially get banned for reasons similar to what Lucas is talking about here.
Yeah, I would say definitely bold statement on those being the 3 targeted cards. So there's only one that really stands out in the 3 examples given to me, which is Belittle. I think Belittle fundamentally breaks some of the core tenets of the game. Is it overpowered and just oppressive on the meta right now? I don't think so. So that's just for what it's worth. Do I think that the devs should ban it now rather than later when it becomes a problem? I don't think so. I think that you can let these cards sort of exist and run their course and potentially wait until they, make it into some meta decks and become very, very popular and adjust later. That being said, as most people in Arsenal Pass probably know, I'm not a big fan of a meta sort of starting to solidify. We're heading into a major event and then there's a banning 2 weeks before. Just not my favorite as a competitive player, but as a caster, I love it. Belittle's definitely on my list. There's a card that I think that is actually not very powerful, which is also on my list, which is Oasis Respite. I just think the design space doesn't makes not too much sense when you look at defense reactions and how the other cards in Flesh and Blood have been designed around defense reactions, like defense reactions hosers, like Command and Conquer, a lot of Ranger cards, stuff like that. And Oasis sort of bypasses that for a 1 for 5. And there's definitely a few others, but I haven't kept an ongoing list. Belittle is definitely the one that comes first and foremost in my mind, we talk about cards that break the core tenet of the game and will always be a problem potentially. What about you, Hayden?
No, just making sure that Brendan gets in his love for Wizard by making sure that he calls out Oasis Respite, even though it's definitely not an issue.
Like I said, I don't think it's a good card. I just think that, like, I don't know, it's a weird design space.
Hey, I'll point to Steelblade Shunt that's 1 for 7, technically, you know, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't faced that card since Welcome to Wraith. But
Exactly. See, it all revolves around what you play into. No, I agree. I think Oasis Respite is an interesting card. I don't think it's a card that I would see banned, but maybe it's a card that it's an interesting design space. And should they have entered into that? Don't know. I think, Lucas, you talk about cards being preemptively banned versus, I guess, just-in-time banned, you know, so as they become powerful. So I think a good example of this is you look at, like, Stubby Hammers in Classic Constructed versus Blitz. So preemptively banned in Blitz by LSS, knowing full well what that could do to the format with the release of Fire. Not banned in Classic Constructed until we saw Fire sort of break out, and then, okay, now we need to ping it back. We knew, they even said when they banned, wow, we knew this was a thing, but we wanted to see how quickly people would adopt it and where they would get to maturity of these deck lists, which is an interesting thing to say, but that's basically a great example of the two things that they could do: ban preemptively or ban in time. I think both are really valid, and I think we're going to see both continue to be used by LSS, and I think it's going to be really dependent on what events are coming up, to be honest. I think it's going to be really centered around what's happening. So I think, for instance, in that example, the preemptive ban of Stubby Hammers and Blitz makes a lot of sense for a format that at the time was being used for a skirmish season coming up, was more of a casual format at the time, before we saw it at the World Championships, and they wanted to make sure that, you know, enjoyable gameplay remained. Stubby Hammers and Classic Construct, on the other hand, we were entering into I want to say at that time we were coming into a Road to National season. Can't remember the timing on it. Brendan, help me out. There was a constructed season that we were in the midst of, or, you know, it was before, so it was banned by the time we got to legal, of course, but I think in the Road to National season around that time was legal. And I think, you know, you see that of like, okay, we want to see it out. We don't think it's as powerful as in Blitz. Let's let it run its course. And then we make the decision heading into something like the Pro Tour, you know, where there's an event on the horizon that they're more focused on. For instance, they can use a testing ground of more local events, and then before a big event, go there. So I think they'll use it continuously. I think they'll use both ways to look at bans. And in terms of cards, I just want to touch on this because Lucas points out 3 cards that are prevalent and have been talked about by a lot of people: Stalagmite, Art of War, and Belittle. And Belittle has this really interesting, I think it's almost like a dichotomy. Like, maybe it is on the spectrum of when you look at power and design philosophy pushed, right, as above rate. But also, that is a card that a lot of people see as something that is necessary into ice decks, right? Like, what does an aggro deck look like into Icelander without Belittle? You know, Belittle has been pointed to in Fires, if not the most important card for helping that Icelander matchup and continuing to balance that hero in the format. So that's interesting. There's other cards I think that could be, you know, Berserk is another card that's just been printed that I look at and go, that's a card that could at some point be broken. It has words on it that are scary on a card. Tome of Fiendal is a card.
Draw a card.
Yeah, draw a card. Tome of Fiendal, for instance, is a card that I've always been wary of and been waiting for that card to be broken. As it stands, that card has just been a part of bigger things. You know, we've seen it in Dash, we've seen it in Dromai, we've seen it in certain Ranger decks. You know, that card has been
Kano.
Pretty good in Kano. We've seen it as a part of things, but that so far hasn't been the card that is as broken open of game state. But as the game continues, like, we're going to see cards continue to be banned because there's going to be cards that will do this, and anything that says draw a card on it, anything that cheats resources, anything that can push damage. Art of War with Crouching Tigers, that seems scary to me. So, you know, there's you know, these cards that do things can be above rate if given the right circumstances. Those are the cards that I think are always going to be on the watch list. They're on my watch list personally. Stalagmite is, I think, more of an interesting one because its kind of upside is it's printed on the card, really. Like, you can kind of theorize exactly what that looks like in any given meta. But the card is powerful, I will admit. And I think had Ultim been in a position where it was just stomping on aggro decks because of Stalagmite over and over again, then maybe we would have seen Stalagmite banned. But I think Stalagmite was a consideration at one point. Anyway.
Yeah, I think it's situationally powerful, though. And some decks can play around it better than others. The thing about Stalagmite as well is that there's actually quite a dichotomy of thought between Stalagmite and Rampart the Ramsot, which I'll be honest, surprising to me. I do think this Stalagmite is just objectively better into like some of these Runeblade matchups. But I mean, the Canadian region itself was very known for not putting Stalagmite into their Oldhim decks and actually putting Rampart of the Ram's Head. The idea being that you get more value out of Rampart of the Ram's Head because you're utilizing Crown of Seeds so much through the match. So yeah, Stalagmite doesn't pop out for me as like that needs to be banned immediately, or that I don't know if it breaks the tenets, but yeah, situationally it can block a ridiculous amount of damage. So yeah, I agree with you, Hayden, that sort of just-in-time bans seem to be what they do. That seems to be LSS's MO, unless something is so egregiously overpowered that they need to preemptively ban it because it's effectively a mistake.
Well, it's not even that. I think, let's say they're in development for a set, 3 or 4 sets down the line, and they're testing and they go, well, hold up, there's this card back in Arcane Rising called Art of War, which is now making this whole set not be viable for the way we want to take the direction of design. Do they change the whole design of the set? And even though these cards could be within the fundamentals of Flesh and Blood and the design space they want to operate in, but just won't operate correctly in how they want it to because of one single card, then I would expect that they go, okay, X set releases on X date. At this ban announcement, Art of War is now banned in Class Constructed or Blitz, whatever it is. And that I can see that continuing to happen. And I think that's a little bit of the Stubby Hammers thing, right? Like that was a card that was a great card in Monarch Limited. It was a card that was used sparingly in Blitz. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, we know that this is going to break tenets of what we want to happen with this new set. So we've got to get rid of that. And I think we'll see that. That'll be the majority of preemptive bans, I think, will be around design space and them identifying stuff during their testing process, during the development process. And then the in-time bans are going to be things are too powerful, got to balance things here and there.
Yeah. And I think I'll just quickly while we're here, I'll probably add Mask of the Pouncing Lynx to my list as well. It's super powerful. But yeah, you said with the Crouching Tiger stuff, but in Class Constructed, I mean, the value of that card is effectively like carrying Husk level value on a permanent on the battlefield. And it's probably going to get worse with the Crouching Tiger stuff. So we'll see. Yeah, I think the LSS ultimately is sort of playing it a bit by ear, right? We've seen the strategy of bannings and the reasons why they ban cards kind of adapt dynamically as, I don't know, the game sort of grows and matures. So I'm not exactly sure what method they're going to use going forward.
I don't think they do either, and I think that's okay. I think they're pretty fluid with the ban list at this point, and it's going to revolve around balancing through design, but also balancing through organized play and what we see. So yeah, great question, Lucas. I think you could go so deep on this, and I think each person that's involved with LSS's sort of development and design is probably going to have a different input on this. You know, I look at someone like Brian Gottlieb. I'm sure he's had his fingerprints on that recently. Is that different to how other people have looked at it? So I think almost certainly. If you do want to get your questions in for the Commander Cookout, you can submit those to arsenalpassfab@gmail.com. You can drop them in the YouTube comments. You can DM us, tweet at us. If you're a Patreon in the Discord, you can also pop your question in the Commander Cookout section there. Brendan.
I actually have one more news headline, Hayden, that I think we might have skipped over, and it has to do with a little format called Blitz.
Oh, yes, go for
it. So there has been a banning and an unbanning. So the irreverent members of Legendary Studios have walked back their incorrect decision to ban Stormstriders in Blitz and have actually unbanned that card. Kano is back. I don't remember Aether Wildfire being a part of the deal, but apparently they lopped that in, so Aether Wildfire is gone, but Stormstriders are back, which Kano actually might be less powerful, period. But the deck is functional, it's fun, and it's not this kind of high variance BS that it was without Stormstriders. So I will personally be playing Kano again. I think that it's going to be an interesting, a competitive deck, not an overpowered deck, and I do think it's in a good spot. I would have liked to see them unban potentially things like Snapback and Stir for Kano. Again, Icelander is this weird dynamic in Wizard that it's limiting the cards that can potentially come back and be used in Kano. Because I think without Aether Wildfire, those cards are actually relatively healthy in a deck like Kano. But Icelander is a slippery slope. Aether Ice Vein has been suspended, I think it was, in Blitz for Icelander. So just keep that in mind. But Stormstriders, Icelander in Blitz could potentially be very powerful, like Red Emeritus Scoldings coming out of Arsenal. Hypothermia is banned, so Icelanders match up into aggressive decks in Blitz, particularly things like Chain certainly has taken a hit. But I still think that Icelander is probably one of the better decks in Blitz, and Kano is back to, being playable. It's fun, and it's sort of the wizard that we know and love. Yeah, even without Aether Wildfire.
I mean, so yeah, just to cover that, Aether Wildfire is banned, just outright banned. See you later in Blitz. Aether Icevein is suspended until the next ban is suspended announcement, which is January 30th, and then they'll revisit. So that's only months away. Hypothermia is suspended until Icelander becomes Living Legend. I think they've seen the power of Hypothermia in Icelander, and it's a no-no until that hero is gone. And Stormstride is now legal, as Brendan said, moved from suspended. The Aether Icevein, look, I think Icelander is still the most powerful hero in Blitz, personally. I think Aether Icevein is a card that, to be honest, for a part of the time, wasn't even in our list for Worlds. Yeah. We ended up going back to the red one, but the blue and yellow were not on our list. Hypothermia is a big hit. That is the biggest hit, I think. But Stormstride is a massive gain. So, I think Icelander and... Yeah, Kano's back on the table, like you say, but I think Icelander has changed. It's going to look different, but still very powerful. And I'm interested to see what happens. So I think that is... I can't remember when the skirmish season is or if it's been announced. I feel like it's after the... I think this ban, the next ban season announcement happens before the skirmish season. So we might see some revisiting of Icelander, I think. But we'll see. Brendan, let's get into the main topic of the pod and talk about Dynasty's impact in Classic Constructed, and we're going to talk about Blitz as well. So Constructed overall, we're going to talk about 5 classes today. We're going to get through these, talk about some of the impacts, some of the cards we're looking at, some of the strategies we think might be relevant, and just where we think Dynasty is going to take these 2 formats. So I want to start a little bit first and just talk about some of the tokens, actually, and what we're seeing with cards, because I think this is super interesting. Like, we've got a set here, and we've seen this introduced with a few of the sets now, where you get access to basically cards that create these effects, right? So, you have the Ponder token that's coming out from the Wizard side, which is a really interesting mechanic. We're going to talk about that when we get to Wizard. But that I just want to cover what these do in case people aren't familiar, haven't seen all of them. Ponder says at the beginning of your end phase, destroy, ponder, and draw cards. This is a token. You've got the gold as well that's now coming above copper and silver, and that's really important to obviously the assassin class, along with silver, and then Spellbane Aegis, which I think is a card we're going to talk about quite a bit as well, because I think this is quite interesting as a token that gives Spellwood 1. As a wizard player, Brendan, I can already see you sulking, so I did want to touch on those. But I want to ask you about just kind of the generics that we see. Any thoughts on things like Imperial Warhorn and the crown that does give you the status as a royal?
Yeah. So Imperial Warren, honestly, no thoughts at this point. It's just like, that's one of those cards that I'm not going to worry about it and think about it too much at the very beginning of a set as the meta source starts to try to find its footing. The Crown, on the other hand, is very good. And I think it's almost an immediate slot into a deck like Kasai. It's just so good with the blood in their hands. And the fact that you're able to get the gold effectively for free, you just net yourself a resource plus plus you get to filter a card. And of course, that process is you pitch a blue, you pay for the gold, you get another card, and you net one resource up. So I think that piece of equipment is fundamentally extremely powerful, and I think it slots into some decks just directly, right? I think some decks will opt to play that as their headpiece almost immediately, and it will just be kind of strictly better than some of the other options that were available.
Interesting, because it doesn't defend, right? So it's just it starts in play, just gives you the gold token, nothing else. So I hadn't really thought about it for a deck like Kasai. That's interesting. I guess we'll see. The other ones I wanted to, you've got these Imperial Edict, Imperial Ledger, and the Imperial Warhorn, which we just talked about. I agree. I think it'd be interesting to see where these kind of slot in. Is this more of a thing that we see in the Emperor? We aren't going to touch too much on the Emperor. Maybe in the second pop we will. But yeah, I'm interested to see like kind of what that means. Ornate Tessin is actually something that I'm super interested in. This is the equipment offhand. It's instant, 1 resource, destroy it, and put a card from your hand on the bottom of your deck. And if you do, draw a card. Like, I'm interested to see if this card is going to be relevant for Blitz, for potentially drawing to cards that you need in a certain matchup. Like, is this an option that people want to actually have in their deck? Think about this with a second, with a Claw and a Brute, for instance, or a Centauri Saber and a Warrior, for instance.
Yeah, just to quickly speak on the Emperor, I haven't dove too deep into the Emperor. Haven't thought too much about the potential interactions, but I would actually be willing to be incorrect on this and be attacked for it. Just come at me on Twitter. But I think that the Emperor is unplayable garbage. Like, I think that card, I think it's a bad hero. I don't think it'll be played. I don't think it'll be relevant. I think that it's probably more of a collector's item. the ability is just fundamentally kind of meh, and you're not really compelled to play this sort of wizard warrior. And I don't see the Emperor being played. The other cards that we were talking about, things like the crown and this whole royal concept, those are cool. But Emperor, I just don't see it having a splash. But I could be wrong, right? Like you take a dual class, there's a lot of opportunity there. So, yeah, my opinion.
Yeah, I think you might be wrong, but but we'll see. The Emperor does have access to what now the largest card pool in Blitz.
Yeah,
that's pretty interesting. Well, I guess technically not, because you can only play red cards, so maybe it's not. It's slightly under, but yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot of powerful red cards in this format. 15 life. Yeah, I don't know. My initial take was I really didn't like the hero when I saw it, reviewed it at PT Lille. But as I've seen the set come out and the things I think you might be able to do with it, it's interesting. I think it's better than Shiana, for instance, right now. I think Shiana's none of those cards on the list where it's like at one point Shiana could be absolutely broken because of specializations. But
it's getting there, though. I don't know. Don't doubt Shiana. That day.
You know someone plays Shiana at Worlds, right?
Yeah, his name is Keith. It's the guy who runs the Ohio.
Realm Games, Keith.
Realm Games, yeah, it's Keith.
I didn't know it was Keith. That's fantastic. I just knew that someone played Shiana. Anyway, we'll see. Timestamp this. Do the little the Zach bun. Remind me in, and we'll see if Brendan is right about the Emperor. Let's get into it because we've got a few classes we want to get through. Let's start with, I put it at the top of the list, Brendan. We're going to talk about Brute first, and we're going to look at just the heroes themselves and what we think they get out of this. Let's talk Reiner. Obviously we've had the Rock printed, or Rock. So, there is a lot of people looking at this as, is this a new archetype? Do we have something that you can build around Rock? And I've thought about this over the last sort of few days. What does Rock look like? And I think Rock as a weapon, it's hard, right? You have to have an empty hand. So you have to be set up to use this card, whether it be even just a counter on your tunic. That's kind of like base level of where you need to be able to play this. So, you could pitch blue into something like Madcap Charger, which we'll talk about that card. That card is fantastic. And then tunic off the last resource coming with Rock. I mean, that's 12 damage for 3 cards. Like that's a pretty good return, and your tunic counter. But I think Rock is something that we're going to see archetypes built around, but is really going to be setup based. I think it's going to be decks that look to do a couple of really big turns and utilize Rock as their weapon. I see things like, I look at Chandler's list from the Calling, where he's playing things like Smash a Big Tree. He's just trying to trade 2 cards for 7 and 2 cards for 8 and get through to his big Blood Rush Bellows turns. Well, maybe there's also big Rock turns there you can have, and I think that's where we're going to see. I think of something like E-Pod in play. You play out a couple of barrage and beatdowns, intimidate the whole hand, and then come in with Rock. I can see that being an archetype.
Yeah, my question around Rock would be, like, is it a legitimate consideration for a weapon? Because there's a massive opportunity cost in losing things like Claws, right? Even when you say setting up energy potions, that means all of the turns in between that, you're not able to do something like play Blood Rush Bellows and do your Claws turn and things like that. So is it more cute, or is it like a legitimate pick for a weapon? Maybe in Blitz, it's a bit more viable. But yeah, the conditions that you have to meet in order to be able to swing Rock, I mean, they're tough, right? It's not a small ask.
Yeah, I think I see Rock as like a pseudo replacement for what some of these Claws decks are trying to do. Like Claws, in reality, Claws is only good on Blood Rush Bellows turns, really. Like their weapon is underrated otherwise, and there is other ways you can utilize it with like the draw and discard effects that could go again. Madcap Charger is a really interesting card for it, I think. But even if you take Madcap Charger as an example, so I need the Charger, I need a card to discard to it, and I need the blue, and now I can come in for 8 with my Claw. Well, I want to be on Club. Like give me Club. Like Club is really above rate, whereas Claw is actually below rate. So I think we're going to see these Rock decks look a little bit similar to what we've seen the Blood Rush Bellows decks look like, but like a bit more set up. So rather than just having only these Blood Rush Bellows turns that can push these big turns, now you have this potential with like I said, an E-Pot and a tunic counter, for instance, to be like, okay, here's 4 barrage and beatdowns that I've stacked to my deck. That's, let's say it's 2 red and 2 yellow. That's 14 plus 7. There's 21 damage off my 4 cards and my resource set up and play. And you can't block. You can't do anything about it. Like that's a pretty big setup turn that's going to push damage that your opponent cannot do anything about.
Mm-hmm. I think in like Zoomer Flesh and Blood, anytime something is prefixed by saying that you have to set up an energy potion or potentially like stack a certain sequence of cards. It's just like, I believe when I see it, right? Kano, that's one of the ones where it's like, yeah, you got to set up these E-Pods in order to do this double Lesson in Lava combo turn. But Kano also like turbo draws his deck, plays E-Pods at instant speed, like all of that ish. So yeah, I mean, I think that if Rock becomes a viable weapon and can be activated consistently, like yeah, it's gonna be really good. So somebody's just got to crack that.
I think don't worry too much about purposely. I think, yeah, I get what you're saying. Like, I agree. It's like, oh, you have to do this and this, and there's all these hoops to jump through. I will say, I think the format has changed a little bit. We saw people doing this a lot more with like even like Icelander in this format, right? Like these games are going a bit longer, but
yeah,
we're going to talk about Mech. There's decks that are potentially getting even more aggressive. What I would say is you don't even necessarily need to set this up. It just, if you potentially there's 9 barrage and beatdowns in a deck, right? Here's 3. Here's my Rock. Come in. There's also Blood Rush spells. Like this, I guess what my point is with Rock is that it's around big turns. Some of them can be set up. Some of them can just be natural, I think. And that's kind of how Brute plays. Is it going to be better than something like Romping Club, for instance? I don't know, but I think there's an archetype there. And I think because of how much people have talked about Rock, I definitely wanted to start with that weapon.
I mean, it boils down to me and you. Like, we just don't know at this point, but 3 for 7 on a weapon, it's pretty good. Just someone's got to figure out how we can activate it consistently or consistent enough that, maybe there's a heuristic. It's like you activate it 2 to 3 times in a game, you just win the game. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, probably. Like, how many decks actually? There's a lot of decks out there right now that use their weapon for that. Hanabi Blaster, for instance. How many times are you probably going to attack with that weapon in a game? Like, if the weapon is powerful enough, doesn't matter. For instance, I look at go back to Chandler's Brute list. He's probably only attacking with those claws only on Blood Rush Bellows turns. The rest of the time, he's presenting a card off to, he's playing 2-card hands, and that's I think that's what a Rock deck could look like. So if you are looking to build Rock decks, that's where I would start, is 2-card decks that want to look to set up turns or have these big turns. But what I'm more excited about, to be honest with you, is Club. I think Romping Club is back, baby. Madcap Charger might be the best Brute card in the set, I think, just quietly.
Really?
Yeah, I think this card is very, very good. If you haven't seen Madcap Charger, it is at red. It is 1 cost, attacks for 5, and defense for 3. And says there's additional cost to playing Madcap Charger. Discard a random card. If it has 6 or more, attack. Charger gets go again. So immediately, all I think about is 3-card hand, Charger blue, and your Madcap Charger blue, and the 6 attack with Romping Club. All of a sudden, there's a 10 damage hand off 3 cards. Like, these are the sort of things that I'm starting to look at. You think about this in Guardian with glacial footsteps. Like, this is something that we've seen people come back to, and I think this allows, like, Club is such a strong weapon, and that's just a 3-card hand. Like, what can you do off 4 or 5-card hands? I think in particular, maybe more for Blitz, but Beat and Trackers is a really powerful piece of equipment that allows you to, usually in a game of Blitz, you might only need the Scab Skin Leathers to give you that 1 extra action point to be able to have the turn you need to with something like Club. And now you've got Beaten Trackers to guarantee it. You come in with your discard effect, whatever it be, and then you just have Club off Beaten Trackers. Like, that's really powerful for an extra 5 damage in Blitz. Class Constructed, maybe not quite as relevant because you need more than 1 action point, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Beaten Tracker is actually the card that not the card I'm most excited about, because the card I'm most excited about in Brute is Berserk. Period. That card can break the game. But Beaten Trackers is just like, immediately it's like, that's super powerful. Maybe my mind is still too much in Blitzland, but this card is ridiculous, and I think you've talked about it with me already in Levia. Like, it's super good. So I'm very excited about Beaten Trackers. I look at something like, Madcap Charger into Club. I mean, that's 3 cards for 10, so it's kind of underrated, to be honest, but you get an Intimidate trigger on top of that if you're playing something like Reinar. So something to consider. 3 for 10 is above rate. I thought it was
3 cards for 10.
2. Okay, I guess I'm used to the 2 for 8 world. That's why
2 for 8 is 2 for 8. Massively above rate.
Yeah. So yeah. Sorry, I'm in Zoomer Flesh and Blood world where you 2 for 8 off the Wounded Bull, and then you block for 3 with the other cards, so you're 3 for 11 effectively, or something like that. But yeah, I mean, for Brute, it's really good. But Intimidate trigger is not nothing, right?
It definitely isn't. It definitely isn't nothing. Yeah.
Coming from Hayden, who got juiced by Intimidate. Yeah, Hayden, you having like the flashbacks, just like, yeah, it's definitely not nothing. But you're right. It's probably one of the better Brute cards that we've seen printed, and does it costing 1, having go again. The first thing you think about is Romping Club.
It just allows you. So I use the example of like a 3-card hand, but actually, what I'm most excited about with this card is it can do so many things. Like, it's good on the Blood Rush Bellows turn. It's good when you're trying to play 4 and 5 card hands. Like you play this out of hand, you discard your 6 attack, and then you play something like we'll talk about in a second, but Savage Beatdown out of Arsenal. Your kind of finisher, or you play your Massacre out of Arsenal. Like this is the way that you're going to be able to both play 3 card hands and trade damage with something like Club, but also be able to push 5 card hands. And I can see this slotting into a deck that plays Claws. I mean, look at Claws, right? The resource constraints are a bit tough because of the fact Claws cost 2 for 3, but you can still set up Claws turns with that, especially on a Blood Rush Bellows turn, which I think is good. So I think this card is potentially the biggest win for Brute, even though it's not the sexiest card, it's not necessarily the most powerful. I think it's going to be one of the best cards that Brute gets out of this, both for Livia and for Rhinar. Talked a bit about Rhinar. If I talk a bit about Livia with this kind of aspect, I think Livia is going to look to move away from the shadow side of herself right now and move more to the Brute side. And that's natural, right? We've seen in this set no shadow talent cards, all class cards with the form of Brute. So, I think you talked about being above Raid and Livia. Yeah, you've got Deadwood Rumble. That card is fantastic. You've got Madcap Charger plus Club now. You've got Wild Rides, Pulplings. You've got these ways to play really a quite efficient game plan. Plus, you've got Art of War and Blood Rush Bellows, and still all these in-game sort of shenanigans you can do, and endless more. Like what a frigging card, like 2 for 9. You want to talk about above rate, 2 for 9. Like that is 2 cards for 9. That is that's very good. So Livia is one that I'm excited about, and I think Madcap Charger in particular helps that. I think Beaten Trackers and Blitz is a really big upgrade, and if you're looking to build those decks, those are sort of some of the cards I'll be looking at immediately.
I just wonder what's going to happen to the Ethan Van Sant stock when Levia finally becomes a meta deck. Will Ethan still play Levia in that meta? I have a question for you, Hayden.
Yeah.
So what do you think about Brute cards that say play this card only if you have discarded a card with 6 or more attack this turn? So maybe they have powerful effects, Hayden, but that means sometimes these cards are literally not playable on your own turn. Are these the kind of cards you're going to be slotting in your deck? How much do you have to build around these cards? What's the balance? What do you think about it? Because this is a big sort of, I don't know, what would you call it? Like a marquee thing of a lot of the Brute cards that were printed in this set. Like a lot of them have this specific drawback, this text on it.
Well, I think it's only 2, right? It's Savage Beatdown at Majestic, and it's what's the 0 for 4? Rumble Grunting, which is the non-attack action. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a theme in this, and we talked about the big thing with Crucible now to the set in Dynasty being like different ways to play your hero. This gives you that. But yeah, you're right. It's really something like Savage Beatdown. Having played that card over the weekend, hard to get off. You can't just you can just slot it into decks, and if you play it, you play it, and I think that's fine. And I definitely did some work with this card in one of my matches where I played Blood Rush Bellow into this off Goliath Gauntlet's 16 off a 3-card hand or whatever. But I think if you really want to get the most out of a card like Savage Beatdown or Rumble Grunting, it's probably going to be more of a build around thing. It's going to be really high 6 attack decks. You're going to be playing Pulpings and Wild Rides and Madcap Charges in your deck to make this sort of thing work. But that archetype is now there. That archetype wasn't really there before. Wild Ride and Pulping were options to allow you to go wide and push damage and interact with things like Prism and stuff like that. And now you have a potential fully fleshed out archetype that's there available to you. And I think Romping Club, for instance, is another reason you want to, or another part of what will go into this kind of build. So, wanted to
go ahead.
I just want to say,
because we talked about, you said there was only those 2 cards. I was kind of lumping in Madcap Muscle as well. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on that card as well, since it didn't technically have that drawback, but the card is super underrated if you don't sort of hit that. You've already discarded a 6.
Yeah. So Madcap Muscle is an additional cost to discard a random card. And if that card is 6 or more, so it's at red, it's 3 cards for 7, which is,
you're right.
Sorry, 3 cards for 9. Sorry, which is
really good.
It's right? That's rate, but it's you can intimidate trigger, but you have to have the 3 cards. And in the format that we talk about right now, where we are, Madcap Muscle is probably the least exciting card to me in this format. Blue is interesting because you can get a 3 for 7, which in the right circumstances might be enough. That might be okay. But Madcap Muscle, that's probably the card. That and at the moment, Blessing of Savagery are cards I'm not particularly looking at. I'm more interested in things like, what can you do with Savage Beatdown, for instance? I'm more interested in that.
Mm-hmm. What is your thoughts on, just quickly, Skullcrack and the ability to potentially get a resource off of it? You think that's powerful? Yeah,
Skullcrack's interesting to me. I think that card is, when I saw it, people were saying this is one of the best cards Brute's gotten in a long time. I was like, yep, card's fine. You know, it's not a card I want to play ever. Like, really. Like, if I'm playing 2-card hands and I'm playing this coming for 6, like, that's not where I want to be. I'd rather block out and attack with my club, right off 1 card for 4. The discard effect, yeah, it's relevant, but is it more relevant to something than, say, Massacre? I don't think it is. So, I don't know. The one resource could be super important for setting up specific sequences, you know, where it's like, currently Brood is 1 resource short of doing something. So, I'll give you an example. When Skullcrap, because it says it's randomly discarded, it's not to pay a cost or whatever, you get a resource. Let's say you pitch a blue, you wild ride, and you discard Skullcrack. Well, now all of a sudden I can 2-card 10 because I can pitch my blue, I can have my wild ride, and I get my replacement card off wild ride still. I discard my Skullcrack, and I come in with my club afterwards. 2-card 11 even. Like, that's super powerful, right? 2 cards for 11. Like, you want to talk about Wounded Bull. Don't worry about that. You've just done 2 cards for 11. That's huge. But you can't guarantee that. You can't guarantee, first of all, that you're going to hit Skullcrack, even if it's already in your hand, because you could discard the other card. So it is hard, I think, to say that Skullcrack, it's hard to be consistent with it. And when you can't be consistent and reliably do something in Flesh and Blood, that reduces the power level quite a bit because you've taken away your ability to do that round after round after round and have these consistent play patterns. Yeah.
Yeah, I think sorry, I was kind of having an internal thought about Madcap Muscle, and yeah, you're right. Like, it is not. It is definitely at rate and kind of, I don't know, just a bit of an underwhelming card. Let's just end with Berserk then, Hayden. Is Berserk so says draw a card if you're in draw a card, multiple cards potentially in a single turn, which is sort of a recipe to potentially break the game, maybe draw your entire deck. Someone can figure out a way to do that. What do you think about Berserk? Is it broken? Is it the most powerful card ever printed, or is it just, I don't know, where does it sit for you right now?
Oh, it's either trash or it's amazing, right? Like, it's not one of those cards that you're like, it's so. Like, I played with it over the weekend in a couple of different builds, and it was fine. I did a pretty ridiculous turn with it, which involved a double Blood Rush Bellows, so the turn was already going to be ridiculous. But I drew like 5 or 6 cards or something, and was able to continually to cycle like cards like Pulping and Wild Ride, and I think I presented like well over 35 damage or something. So like, there is a ceiling to that card. I think if someone can break it and find the way to set up these turns with it, yeah, this card could be nuts. What does that look like? I'm not sure. Like, the constraints are you have to have a certain amount of 6 text. You have to have a certain way to cycle through the cards that you draw. You have to be able to play them. So, you know, the initial thing you go to is Madcap Charges, Wild Rides, Beast Within, all this sort of stuff. But you have to have other cards in your deck, and those are going to get in the way on first cycle. So you all of a sudden go, wow, it's a second cycle card. Now that sort of like ceiling is coming down and down and down. I don't know. Like, it's one of those cards that could potentially end up being just crazy. But on the surface of it right now, and having played a few games of the card, seems like it's not what, you know, the floor is low. Let's say that as well.
Good to know. Hopefully someone is able to figure out a way to break that card and break it. Well, maybe not hopefully, because I assume if that card was very good, it would probably be one of the most oppressive things in Flesh and Blood ever.
It's a pretty ridiculous combo if you can get that going or something. The last thing I just want to talk about is I think Reincarnate is a good upgrade for a yellow 6 attack, particularly in Blitz, where, you know, fatigue could be a thing. And Livia, I think if you were looking at how you want to play Livia right now, I think Livia is very strong. I think in Blitz, Beaten Tracker, Madcap Charger, club builds look really interesting. In CC, I think more traditional brute builds also look really interesting. So that's where I would start. Why don't we talk about Warrior, Brendan? Because, you know, Warrior definitely got some cards. And the first one I want to start with is just like, let's just talk about the weapons, because Warrior got a ton of weapons. So it got the Jubiel Spellbane, which is the majestic weapon, the sword that creates a Spellbane Aegis, if it hits. You've got the Merciless Battle Axe, which is the most interesting one and probably the one that's going to see the least amount of play. This is a 3-cost axe that if it has double its base power, then it has the overpower text. And then you've got these Quicksilver Daggers, which I think are the most interesting. These single-handed, one-handed dagger weapons that say if another weapon you control this turn is gain go again, the dagger also gets go again. So, you know, think with Dory's ability, you could attack with the first dagger, give it go again, and your second dagger has go again, then you could attack with the first one again, you know, if they all hit. Things like that. So Quicksilver Dagger, very interesting, I think.
So if Jubiel Spellblade is good enough to just Spellbane is good enough to just automatically be slotted against a Runeblade matchup, then yeah, this is going to be a terror for things like Kano. I could see a scenario where, you just don't play this card because the defensive value that it gives you is not good enough against Runeblade, and there's not enough sort of wizards running around. And maybe that incremental damage, the incremental Spell Void token is not even good enough against something like Icelander. That's sort of, I guess, kind of wait and see on that one. Merciless Battle Axe, I do agree with you that I don't see it quite yet. This overpower mechanic, it's just a little bit too cute. There is, of course, the big buff that you can get in a card we'll talk about later on this Battle Axe, but yeah, we'll see on that one. At least it's a new archetype. It's an interesting way to play, and yeah, I'm with you on the daggers being the most interesting.
Spellbane is really interesting to me because the opportunity cost is giving up Dawnblade effectively, and
yeah, which is a huge opportunity cost.
It is because of the counters. But let's just talk about what Spellbane could do for you. So let's say that you do get to attack with it. So you come in, you're playing against a Runeblade, for instance. You attack in, they don't defend, or you push through the damage. You've now gotten 4 out of your weapon attack. Mm-hmm. You can attack with it again. Say it has go again. Next time, you're still getting 4 out of it. So over one turn cycle, getting 8 off your weapon attack is actually more than what Dawnblade would do, because it would get 6, for instance, right? The counter doesn't come till the end of the turn. You don't see that +1 until next turn. But if you get to keep Dawnblade counters consistently over multiple turns, obviously that's going to stack up and be worth more. But the Spellbane Aegis. Oh, you're right. It's only if you don't control Spellbane Aegis. So it's only once. Yeah, I saw Brennan's face and I was like, it's not how it works. Yeah, so okay, so you can get 7 value out of the Spellbane. That's still more than the Dawnblade on the first turn, but obviously after consecutive turns, not the case. So yeah, it's interesting. I think it's something that we could see. What I'm actually most excited to see is Dorinthias or Warriors or any hero now with all these weapons show up with like multiple weapons in the deck.
Multiple, yeah.
We've seen it with Brute before, right? And we've seen it with Guardians. You've seen it with like Claws and Club. You've seen it with Sledge of Anvilheim plus Winter's Wail or Anathos or whatever. Like, we now might actually see this with Warrior, for instance. And that's exciting to see. Maybe, okay, Dawnblade in this matchup, but Spellbane in this matchup. It's just going to really depend on actually how impactful Spellbane is.
Yeah, I know some Dorinthias used to play Axes back when Prism was a thing, because that matchup was abysmal. So with this sort of this Jubil, you can't really attack, even if you give it a go again, you can't attack with it unless you like 20 blade it, right? Because it's once per turn action.
You're right. You know what? I completely missed this. Yeah, I just assumed it had the same text as Dawnblade.
Yeah, it's just like the same drawback. I mean, you.
Oh no, but Dory ability overrides that. The Dorinthia ability overrides that.
Yep.
So you can still
Dawnblade.
Yeah, Dawnblade has the same. I'm just looking at Dawnblade has the same text, the once per turn. But if you hit with if you hit because of Dorinthia's ability, you're gonna get
yeah. Okay. Yeah, makes sense. Sorry, we're circling back to our warrior knowledge of 3 years ago at this point.
There's also so many cards in the set. Still definitely trying to get head around.
If I ask the question, is like, okay, I would think if you're playing against Runeblade, if you're playing against something like Briar or even Viscerai, this is basically a 1 resource for 4, right? Pretty much all the time. Because I think that Spell Void token will just hit a rune chant every single time. So is that good enough? Because that is above rate. Mm-hmm. Is that good enough? Or does Dorinthia win the game by getting counters on her sword, right? Or can you just 1 for 4 consistently and you'll just get more value on your opponent, you'll beat Runeblades. If that's the case, I think this is going in pretty much every Dorinthia deck.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I think where you'd see it be relevant is you start to see effects that say, like, if you've dealt arcane damage, like consuming volition, or like that's where I think maybe this becomes more relevant, is when it's doing extra duty on those things, or it's like Spell Void against against something like Kano or whatever, like that's super relevant, right? Like against a Wildfire turn or something. So yeah, I don't want to dwell on it too much. I think it's gonna be interesting to see where people go. The thing that interests me is how people use weapons. Battle Axe, I think we can cover pretty quickly. I think this weapon is just utter garbage. I really don't understand why they printed. Like, you just look at the rate of it. It's like it's 3 for 3. You pay 3 resources to come in for 3. It's below rate, and then it can gain effective dominate if it has double the attack. Like that. That's not great. So I expected to see some like above rate attack actions or attack reactions. Like the non-attack actions or attack reactions. But like you've got this, what's it called? Felling Swing.
But Hayden, what if I Felling Swing? What if I 2 card plus 6?
2 cards for 6 though. That's still the same problem I have. So we can
go
move
back
on
to 2019 with that math.
Yeah,
okay, let's talk. We can talk about War without talking about my favorite.
No, we've got to talk about daggers first quickly. We've got to quickly talk about daggers first, because someone pointed this out to me. is that Centauri Saber plus, this is Fluke and Box actually. Centauri Saber plus Quicksilver Dagger is the way to go. Because you come in with your Centauri Saber, you give it go again, and then that gives you Dagger go again, so then you can attack with the Centauri Saber a second time if it hits. Don't play double Dagger, you play a different, you play your Saber or whatever.
Yeah, does double Dagger ever make sense?
No, I maybe, but twinning blades and stuff like that, or Blood on her hands and Kasai maybe.
Yeah. All right, Bolton.
Go on then.
So Bolton got a legendary card, Spirit of Arena, I think it is, or Irina. Yeah, if it would be put in your soul instead of put in the arena, it lets you play Lumina Ascension as if it were an instant. So I cannot. Someone I promise gave me like a 10-minute spiel on why this is good in Bolton and what it lets you do by playing Lumina instant speed. I've totally forgot it. But we're seeing Bolton get some love. I have. We see Bolton. We see Bolton get some love, which I think is good. I think that Bolton it's one of those classes that, or one of those heroes that just really hasn't scaled well into modern day Flesh and Blood because of its sort of the way it generates resources is kind of fundamentally card disadvantage. So even though I talk a lot of ish about Bolton, I'm pretty happy to see it get some special treatment in Dynasty here with a legendary that slots right into what it tries to do in most games, which is play Lumina Ascension.
Yeah, well, let me fix your issue that you have here. Is that the problem is that via the Vanguard plus Lumina Ascension is not a thing you can do. But,
that's not it?
But now you can because of this, right? Because the problem is that like Lumina Ascension breaks the combat chain, which then makes the Via the Vanguard ability no longer relevant for the chain. So now with if you have Spirit Arena out in the field, you can Via the Vanguard and then you can play your Lumina Ascension instant speed and still have the buff of both. And, particularly I think for both weapon versions, both Raiden versions and Saber versions, that's really interesting, I think, for just, value and actually having these big, strong turns and not just having one big combo turn. Super interesting. This is a legendary though. There's one of it in there. It's also still card disadvantage to play this card because it doesn't even give you a card in soul. So you charge this card to get it on the field, but it doesn't actually give you a card in soul. You've lost the card in soul. So my question to you, Brennan, is like, yes, this maybe helps you have like good V plus Lumina turns, but is this enough to even like shift the needle on Bolton at all?
If there's one thing I know that Bolton players don't care about, it's consistency. So the more high roll, the better. And Spirit, yeah, I mean that's part of it too. Josh Lau would probably beg to differ.
Yeah, sorry, team.
Consistently overperforms with that hero, but I mean, it's cool. It's cute. I think that the Lumina Ascension combo is just fundamentally cool and cute. I don't think it's actually very good. I don't think it's consistent enough. And I've died to it in major tournaments. So,
if you get to do double or triple Lumina on like the first 4 turns, it's really, really good.
It's good.
It's super powerful.
But what happens when you don't do that? It's like it's not so good.
The rest of the deck maybe. Anyway, I don't think it's enough to move the needle on Bolton, but that is interesting. I think we've got to talk about Iron Song Pride because this is not only is it a powerful card, it's a super interesting card. It's the first instant I think we've seen for Warrior, right? It's a Warrior instant aura, cost 1, and this is put a +1 counter on target sword you control. Sorry, I've got the extended art version. It's really hard to read the text on it. And then when Iron Song Pride leaves the arena, removal counters from swords you control, and at the beginning of your end step, if you haven't dealt damage, then the Pride goes away. So it has the same basic text as Dawnblade in terms of if you don't deal damage, if it doesn't hit, then you're losing the counters anyway. So, but this card, I didn't realize this card was a friggin' instant. Like this card represents value going second. You just pop this down, counter on my Dawnblade immediately, come in on the first turn with a counter on it, ready to go. I'm already starting to push the counter build up. You can play this as a reaction, so you can actually put the counter on as a reaction to like lunging press style push over damage, but that damage, that counter stays. This card is super interesting to me. When I first looked at it, I was like, fine, but like the versatility of this card is actually the power of it, I think.
I actually the opposite reaction, and I wonder if I'm just a little bit overzealous with it. And I think that I was like, when I first saw this card, I was like, ugh, because this card just feels very snowbally.
It is.
Yeah, if you ever get to a point where let's say your opponent blocks with a lot of their hand and their armor, and they get blown out by some card, whether it's like a red overpower or you get twinning bladed, et cetera, and you're able to actually continue the turn, keep the Iron Song Pride around, and now they've lost their armor, they go into a 4-card hand, and then they sort of get blown out by some sort of attack reaction on the following turn. There's no way you're coming back from the 3rd Iron Song Pride turn with that staying on the battlefield. So I think this might actually lead to like some kind of annoying scenarios, I think that it's actually just a fantastic card for Warrior, right? Like I would be absolutely putting this in my Dorinthia deck, because the downside here, at the beginning of your end phase, if a sword has not hit this turn, destroy Ironsong Pride, and you have to remove the counters, right? But Dawnblade is already doing that, and the games where Dawnblade has 3-4 counters, you're already so far ahead. And I think that it's much more normal for your Dawnblade to have one counter on this turn, then your opponent like kind of blocks it out, and then you maybe get a counter, a couple turns later in the game, and that's sort of how it cycles over. I think the Ironsong Pride is very, very powerful, and I'm interested to sort of hear your thoughts on that and the potential snowball effect of this card.
Yeah, that's what it has. It has a massive snowball effect. That's literally what it is. And it's, think about like in terms of you commit your equipment to try and stop this, which I think is the correct play. You see this come down turn one, your opponent plays like a glistening steel blade or something. It's like, all right, I'm full steam on committing to just defending this out, getting rid of this Ironsong Pride and getting rid of these counters and trying to reset my opponent. That's going to include probably using a lot of your equipment and probably the whole of your hand. Suddenly you get blown out by a twinning blade, like you say, the snowball is going to be there. Yeah, I think the card's very good. I actually want to ask what you think about this PS mechanic, because we've seen this on a couple of cards. Visit the Imperial Forge is an interesting card. We've seen it on Precision Press, Puncture. This idea of piercing effectively, so piercing 1 is what we're seeing, which is, well, some have piercing 3 as well, depending on what color the card is. But it gives you this ability that if it's defended by an equipment, it has +X, depending on what the piercing number is. Like, what do you think of this card? Is this something that helps you potentially push through these blowout turns?
So I think it's interesting because with Dorinthia specifically, a lot of the defensive play patterns around Dorinthia, when you're trying to dodge like specific attack reactions or take off counters and you don't have a bunch of defense reactions in your deck, you will opt to oftentimes put your armor in front of the weapon to turn off the attack reactions and the reprise effects. And this effectively prevents you from doing that. That being said, like the Pierce mechanic is at a premium here. Like you look at something like Precision Press versus Sharpened Steel. Precision Press cost 1, Precision Press.
You mean right?
Cost? No, I'm talking about Precision Press. The gives your thing plus. Sorry, yeah. Puncture.
Compare it to something that gives Go Again. I think is an interesting thing.
The +3. That's what I meant. Puncture. So you're paying a whole additional resource, which the difference between 0-1 is massively different from the something costing 1 or 2, and it's a premium effect. You're paying a lot for it, so it has to be extremely relevant. I don't know if it's going to be worth it, but if there are effects that you want, right, and they just happen to have piercing on them, like potentially the Go Again, then I think those cards will make the deck, right?
Yeah, Blue Precision Press is really interesting, I think. But I've got I think a better example for Puncture. So let's take Alpha Blood. So that's an attack reaction at red, +3 for 1, and potentially gives +1 to your next attack. Puncture can potentially give +4 for 1 on this attack. It's an attack reaction. Is our Puncture. This card's really interesting, I think. 1 cost for +3, but if there's an equipment on that chain, it's going to be for +4. This can allow you to break the kind of... So the card that people will play around mostly when they're playing against Dawnblade is something like... what's the super that goes and searches a card? Oh, so bad.
Oh, that's... Singing Steelblade.
Singing Steelblade, right? Thank you. Singing Steelblade, which is a card that people often play around. Okay, I got to play around the Iron Song of Singing Steelblade, so I got to play around the 1 for 4. Well, now Puncture offers another 1 for 4. And people are going to be blocking with equipment to stop these turns. So red Puncture on 5-card hands, I think, is like a really interesting card when people are trying to stop things like Iron Song Pride. They're trying to stop Glistening Steelblade. So I think the piercing mechanic actually, the return rate on it actually looks pretty good and better than I thought.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
So even like
Puncture being an attack reaction too. So really like the Sharpened Steel example doesn't actually hold up because this is an attack reaction. So it's, I think it's actually just, it's fine. I think I just kind of misread the card there. It's like, I think this is absolutely something you're going to be playing in for the reasons you're talking about right there.
Yeah. The last one on that piercing, I would just visit the Imperial Forge. I think at blue, this is an interesting card. So it gives daggers and swords attacking this turn, piercing 1. I can see that being quite relevant on a big blood on a hand's turn, or even potentially, in a Bolton or something, like it just negates the equipment effectively, or close to, depending on what the equipment's blocking for.
Yeah, it's really good in Bolton, right? If you're able to set it up correctly.
Yeah. It is an action, so you do have to play it on the turn, so it costs a card, etc. So it might not be relevant, but that one is interesting to me. So yeah, just overall, I think if I'm looking at Warrior right now, in Blitz and CC, whether it's Kasai, Bolton, Dory, whatever it is. I think Dory with the new tools that she has is super interesting. I don't know about Quicksilver. I haven't really looked about Quicksilver and Blitz, but I think traditional just Dorinthia and in Blitz with Pride, with these new weapons that you have. We're going to be playing a list in a video in the coming weeks, which I'm going to be playing Dagger plus Centauri Saber, Brendan. So I think there's a lot of things you can do with this. Kasai has also got some options here as well.
Getting the Flukenbox tech for the video.
Exactly. Let's move on. Let's talk about Mechanologist. I think this might be Mechanologist might be the class, as you said at the top of the show, that's had the most upgrades in this set. Let's start with like Hanabi Blaster, because this is a weapon that I was like, this weapon seems fine. And now that I've seen it in action, I'm like, yeah, okay, this weapon's pretty good.
Yeah, I do think it's really good. I mean, specifically in the boost dash deck, right? Like just coming in for 5. I don't know. Is there anything else to really say about it? You're not going to be activating it potentially every single turn, but the turns that you do activate it will get you so much advantage that in a deck that goes as fast as boost dash does, even in a format like Class Constructed, it's devastating for your opponent.
Yeah, let's talk about why this card's so good, because at first I was like, well, okay, so I can attack with this every third turn. Yeah, it's free, but it's every third turn. Let's go back to the rock thing we talked about before. You don't have to attack with your weapon every turn to get good value out of your weapon. You know, you're playing other cards. The meta we're in right now is a lot about trading value, right? And often that doesn't require your weapon to be used. It's hard to use your weapon. You know, Rosetta Thorn is like contradicts that a little bit, but you know, we're moving out of a meta that's revolving around Rosetta Thorn and Hanabi Blaster. So a good thing to note about this is that also you don't have to boost with that third card, because it says just play a card with boost. So you could go, okay, play an attack boost, and then just play your like throttle for 6 and not boost it. You don't have to boost the third one. So you're not losing value on that card that you're banishing. And then it's free. Like and also you can play this every second turn actually as well, because you stack up steam counters the third time you play a card with boost each turn. So, okay, on the first turn of the game, I boost 3 times, or I play 3 boost cards, get a counter. Next turn, I do boost 3 times, activating boost each time, and then attack with the Hanabi Blaster, because I've now got the 2 counters. And then the next turn. So it's actually every second turn, not every third turn, and it's free. Like, yeah, this card is
free.
This card is free.
This card is busted, dude. Like, I mean, it's free. That's not something that happens a lot in Flesh and Blood. And if you're playing the boost dash deck, you're building up these counters just sort of inherently by playing out your normal game plan. Mm-hmm. And this is a free 5 damage that can come in after you boost potentially the third attack on the turn that you have the 2 steam counters. Yeah. Super, super, super powerful. Actually kind of ridiculous as we start to deconstruct it. And as I'm sure you've now seen in person when you played your events. Yeah,
and we also saw this, I believe, on the coverage for the Battle Hard in Philadelphia. I think the winning list, I'm not actually sure if they were on more of a traditional hybrid list, but you know, I know there's a lot of lists there playing this Hanabi Blaster. So yeah, really interesting. I think if we can talk about cards and stuff, I also want to talk about just like archetypes in general, but like Nitro Mechanoid, or you know, Construct Nitro Mechanoid, like this card is, yeah, it takes a lot to set up, but this card's really powerful. Like it's worth noting, this attack is not a once per turn effect. You can high octane and like combo this. You can attack for like 25. You can use all the counters off the Nitro Mechanoid in one turn with high octane and just come in. It doesn't cost to attack. It's not a once per turn. Just you have to remove the counter. So if you have the action points, you can just do this over and over again.
Yeah, it's freaking nuts. So the question is like how challenging is it to set up with the 3 hyperdrivers specifically? And if you can satisfy that clause and it sort of fits into your normal game plan, if you're almost inherently going to be having the resources to set this up, yeah, you set up the high octane turn, and this is absolutely freaking ridiculous. Like, I think that we're going to be using adjectives like that a lot when we're talking about Mech, because some of these cards are crazy. I just want to quickly. You can talk more about Construct Nitro Mechanoid, but BIOS update as well. We talked about this in maybe it was the Patreon pod, but yeah. This card gives +3 at 0, and then this effect is so non-zero. This effect is so freaking good. The next time a Mechanologist item with cost 2 or less is banished to pay a boost cost this turn, put into the arena? Are you kidding me? Oh, dude. You gotta give me a reason to not play boost dash in this meta.
Yeah, so I'll give you some if you want. Yeah. Fatigue is still a thing, right? You're still, yes, this boost dash now looks like it's super above rate on like almost any metric you look at, but you are using your deck as a resource. So you do have to kill your opponent before you run out of deck. That is your number one primary resource, and that is important to remember. What I think gets around that, though, is, by the way, BIOS update, like you say, crazy good.
Yeah.
You boost 3 times in a turn after you play a BIOS update. It's like, it's not the first attack you boost, it's all of them until you hit the item. So boost 3 times, you have 10 items in your deck. You're really good to hit an item there, whether it's a it's a 2-cost item like an induction chamber, or it's more of these aggressive items like a pounder or a hyperdriver or a Teklo core. Like, all of these are going to be really good. Like, imagine if you just had a Teklo core. Okay, I just played this nimblism that got me 2 resources over the next 2 turns. Like, that is super above rate. So, but the way you get around this, I guess, fatigue potential is, one, Hanabi Blaster, like big Hanabi Blaster turns. You set up in between turn, and then every second turn is just like you just slap them with 5-card hands. That's one way. Mechanoid. That a big high octane Mechanoid turn is how you like push 50 damage on one turn. Like, honestly, I think I heard someone on stream had done like 44 damage or presented 44 damage off a Nitro Mechanoid high octane turn. Like, that can happen. So, I don't know. My question to you, actually, we can talk about Pulse Wave Harpoon. You can talk about how you set up these hyperdrivers. If you're looking at how to set up hyperdrivers, I honestly think it's things like BIOS update. It's things like Blessing of Ingenuity that gets them back after you've boosted through them all. The blues are really good. The reds are really good. Do you need to play the yellows? Not sure. We can talk about that. But Brendan, question for you, right, is like, is Mech too good?
Yeah, I'm actually wondering that. Like, I genuinely think that the answer is probably yes. Like, the thing is, I don't see a mid-range. I think that this mech deck, specifically the aggressive boost mech deck, would dumpster any mid-range deck, specifically too because cards like Pulse Wave Harpoon, it's disruptive as well. We're talking about, this probably has the best math when it comes to just raw attack and the fact that you're just able to get go again in this like pseudo free way by boosting cards off the top of your deck. But you add disruption into that as well. So powerful. And now you add these sort of like combo cards like Construct Nitro Mechanoid with with the high octane. It's freaking wild. So if I'm destroying every single mid-range deck in the format, and I'm also the fastest aggro deck, I got 15 cards that I can put to just tech against fatigue. And that seems very reasonable to me. So yeah, it looks like, to me, I see this, I say, that's the deck I'm going to start playing. That looks like the best deck. Is there something that potentially hoses it? Maybe, but I don't know what it is yet. And it's going to have to be pretty freaking powerful, whether it's a very good fatigue deck or something that is able to sort of, I don't know, tax it. Because I don't see anything racing this. This is so fast. Yeah, it was freaking Azalea.
Hey, you joke. We're going to talk about Ranger in a minute. But I think that's what it's going to be. Traditionally, Boost Dash has struggled against these decks that can, block out well, but also so if you say, okay, I want to go to like an anti-fatigue strategy, it's Nitro Mechanoid, or maybe I'm going to like an item strategy with a Plasma Pistol. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's my strategy. Well, decks that can present on-hit effects are ways to disrupt that, right? Like that is what you'd say. So Guardians, potentially Rangers, that's going to be the one that could be tough. Is it enough? We'll see. It does look really powerful. I'm excited to get into it. But even cards like Jumpstart, right? Like it's like, it's a 2 for 5. But God. Actually I have a Hyperdrive. Now I'm playing 1 for 5s. Like that had boost
0.
on it. Yeah. That's a 1 for 5 with Go Again. That's really above rate.
Yeah, 1 for 5 with Go Again. I mean, those are literally zipper hits now, and it's so good. Hyperdriver 2, getting you the resources like that. It's really good in the Boost Mech deck, and then you have now this. You have this additional equity of building a Nitro Mechanoid. Like, holy crap!
Yeah, you can play 5-card hands and not pitch. Like you have 2 Hyperdrivers out, or you have a Hyperdriver and Tickler Core. Just don't pitch, right? You just come with 0-60, come in with your Jumpstart, come in with your throttle, come with your
BIOS update,
Blaster,
instant speed, playing all my freaking items for free. Like, okay, if you're listening to this on YouTube, or even if you're listening on a podcast, tell us in the YouTube comments why Mech sucks, because I would love to hear it, because it looks so good. I was not surprised to see as many people playing it as we did on the at the Battle Hardened. I mean, specifically, we talked about it a little bit at the beginning of the pod. We haven't really delved into it yet, but Pulse Wave Harpoon is fundamentally a ridiculous card, and that just slots right into this mech deck. It's so disruptive.
That's how you stop your opponent's disruption. Like we just talked about, worried about Guardians and Rangers. Well, hold up. Now you're freaking Red in the Ledger is now blocking on the combat chain, and you're not playing next turn, or you're your spinal crush or whatever. So
or your blue. That's going to be so
Yeah.
tilting. Your blue. That's what the thing's going to snag most of the time is the freaking single blue in the hand.
Yeah.
Oh.
So enjoy, especially when they're trying to play something out of Arsenal. Just want to say, Data Doll probably more relevant in Blitz than it ever has been with all these items, BIOS update, things like that. It's crazy. You can probably assemble some pretty nutty item boards on turn 2 or turn 3. Just don't die and you can't really defend. But yeah, interesting to see what comes of it. Let's talk about Ranger, Brendan, because I think very interesting.
We talked about overrate. Let's go ahead and let's jump into underrate. Here we go.
Let's start with
Ranger fans. Yeah.
Let's start with like the big one. Sandscale Great Bow and this whole new mechanic of aim counters. What's your kind of first thoughts on this, and like how good is this, and who's it for? My first take is it's for Azalea and it's pretty good.
I think it's for Azalea, and I do wonder if it's better than, like, if it actually is 100% better than something like Death Dealer. The aim a lot of these cards in Dynasty require aim counters to sort of realize their potential.
Yeah.
And I might just be asking a little bit too much. I'm not sure yet. Sandscale Great Bow, I think it looks good. It looks like it has potential, but I do think that it could potentially be eclipsed by another weapon. And I see it as I agree with you. I see it as a Azalea weapon. I don't think that Lexi's actually going to be using this. Man, I could really eat those words.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I could see a world where maybe that's not true, but I've thought about this. I've sat down yesterday and I've been building this Azalea deck for Blitz as well. And I think Sandscale Great Bow and basically all the cards in the set are super tied to aim counters, right? Like even the really powerful ones, like Deadeye, that card's scary. Deadeye, which is this majestic at yellow that costs 1 that says your next arrow this turn has +3, and if that arrow has an aim counter, it gains when this hits a hero, look at their hand and choose a card, they discard it. All of a sudden, you've Azalea something, or well, I guess you can't get the aim counter, but you've got the aim counter, you come in and all of a sudden you connect this, you take a card from the hand, like that's really big. So I think the disconnect for me is going to be, there we go, we can see Brendan now if you're watching on YouTube. He was in the dark for a while.
Sorry. Yeah. I didn't realize that it had gotten dark and I had to yell at Siri or whatever, the house.
So yeah, but they're so tied. Like my takeaway so far from looking at Azalea and looking at Sandscale Great Bow and what the potential is. First of all, feels like go tall is the correct way to play this to me. Mm-hmm. But secondly, the Azalea ability, really powerful for giving dominate, but you lose your aim counter you can't have the aim counter from Sandscale and the Azalea ability, which is tough. So I think you've got to find a way to work out what that looks like. And that's going to be the toughest thing about building this. But aim counters and these cards, with an aim counter, these cards become above rate, but let's not forget that you're paying 1 for the Sandscale Great Bow. And really, you're not getting up on value unless it's a card from the top of your deck that you take. If it's actually a card from your hand that you end up putting in with the Great Bow, because Great Bow says, look at the top card of your deck, you may put an arrow from your hand or the top of your deck face up into your arsenal. If it's from your hand, you've now paid 1 resource to put a card from your hand into play, into your arsenal. So if it's top of the deck, much, much better. I think it's just super interesting. But there's crazy things you can do. Like, okay, I take the top card of my deck, paying 1. It's now my arsenal, now Azalea ability after like an opt or something. And there is cards, of course, that opt in previous sets. So I think what you're going to see is taking a mix of these new cards, because with aim counters, they can be above, like even long shot, right? Like it's a 0 for 5 at red. I think Azalea with great bow and the cards we've got here is probably going to take a while to get to the best lists. But I think there's some people out there, some Ranger aficionados, I look at the Azalea player who top-aided Poland Nats. Like there's some good Ranger players out there, and I think they'll be able to crack it. What do you think about Heatseeker? Heatseeker. This is the 1 for 5 at the beginning of your end phase. Put the top card of if it's hit, put the top card of your deck into your arsenal. Yeah, I mean it's like kind of like Snatch, like, right? In some ways. Mm-hmm. It goes face up into your arsenal. So with the Azalea, obviously you can put that card away if it's not an arrow or it's not something you want. But even like, let's just say you hit this into like a non-attack action. Like that's huge. You've played your arrow 1 for 5, maybe you're to Great Bow into play or whatever it's hit, and now you get a +3. Say it's like a red take aim or something like that. That's really good.
I think this is the best Ranger card in the set. And I wonder, I'm pretty sure that Lexi plays this card as well, right?
Yeah, potentially. I guess Lexi can be a bit more punished by this card than say something like Azalea can, where Azalea can obviously hero ability it away. But yeah, Heatseeker is the standard. Like all the rest of the cards work with aim counters mostly, whereas this is standalone. Like, so even the Majestic Immobilizing Shot is like aim counter dependent. Deadeye, aim counter dependent. This card is not, which is interesting.
Do you expect aim counters? What do you think the chances that aim counters are just a bit too finicky and cute, that they potentially, they're not too realistic, right? And we might just default back to the old Ranger cards, the more the red and the ledgers. Like, those cards are fundamentally powerful. Do you think that aim counters are going to be a hit?
Yeah, I think so. I honestly think so.
Okay.
I think, but it's not just the Sandscale Great Bow. I actually look at a card like Point the Tip. I actually think that's probably the most important card that you get in conjunction with these arrows, which is the 0 cost non-attack action that says target face-up arrow in your arsenal gets +3 and put an aim counter on it. So, it's nimblism plus you give the aim counter buff. I'm surprised we only got one of these ability, but I think it's probably shows the power of that ability of giving the aim counter through a non-attack action. But yeah, I honestly do. I think, not for Lexi, I don't see it for Lexi, but for Azalea, I think this to me seems like the way forward. I think it's an upgrade. Yeah. Death Dealer is really good. Like, don't get me wrong, but if you're paying 1 and taking the top card of your deck and putting it into your arsenal, you've close to Death Dealer, but obviously the card is random and yeah, it's tough. I mean, the one thing that's worth pointing out, right, is like if you, actually, don't worry. It's got to be an arrow card, so you can't even do some cool stuff with the top of the deck. It's going to be less consistent. I think it's going to be interesting to see what people come up with. Let's look at it this way. Say 50% of the time you put a card from your hand, 50% of the time it's an arrow from the top of your deck. Is that good enough? It might not be, and that might mean that it's not enough, because there's also only a certain amount of arrows that actually get these aim counter buffs, and some of them are kind of whatever, right? Like I look at Drill Shot. Like, is that card good enough? Because piercing, like, probably not, right?
Yeah, I think that Ranger has an interesting dynamic that Wizard is also sort of suffering from, where there's cards that you want to be able to print for something like Azalea, but if they slot in too well to a deck like Lexi, they might be too powerful. And I think we've seen this a lot with Icelander and Kano, right? Particularly in Blitz. So yeah, a lot of these cards do look like they're meant for Azalea. They're meant for the Sandscour Great Bow and, this aim counter. I guess you could consider it like a pseudo archetype.
Yeah, definitely.
And yeah, I'm not seeing much for Lexi outside of potentially Heatseeker, but we'll see, because Lexi is a balance of deck building as well in terms of being able to fuse and what cards you want in the arsenal, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep. Of course, we have this Blessing of Focus card, which we haven't talked too much about, which is you play it and then it's a blessing, so it pops the turn after. At the start of your turn, destroy Blessing of Focus, opt 3, reveal the top card of your deck. If it's an arrow, put it face up into your arsenal with an aim counter. Like, I guess that is the other non-attack action that works alongside Point the Tip, and I think that's what's going to give you the ability to play cards like Deadeye and all this stuff. But worth noting, like Blessing of Focus, like that card is 1 for opt 3 and put it into your arsenal. Like, that is effectively draw a card for 1. So like that is okay. Like, yeah, I think it's just going to be, my concern is, like you say, everything's tied to the Great Bow in terms of what you need to do for aim counters. I think, is there a world where you can play Blessings and you can play Point the Tips and you can still play something like Death Dealer, or maybe even Lexi can do this with say just the bows that already has at its disposal? Is that going to be enough? Probably not, but I'm interested to see, because aim counter on something like a Red Ledger does nothing, right? Mm-hmm. So,
but at least you can put it in, like, at least you can put it on there, and it's not like if you hit a Red in the Ledger off of the aim counter can go on there, so you're not like pigeonholed into like it having to go onto these cards that benefit from it.
For sure. You can still play all the other arrows, which is important. But yeah, we'll see.
I'm interested to see from a design perspective, like Ranger at this point in the game's, like, I guess, life, not get just like some strict upgrades, right? Because I do think that it's like a fundamentally underpowered class. We saw it see some success in aggro metas, and that's what it's designed to do. So it was good to see that, right? Good to see that we're probably undervaluing it to some extent. But I would think, maybe as we come to Dynasty, we've seen Rangers kind of consistently fall short. I would not have been surprised to see some just like strictly upgraded cards, maybe some things that are a bit above rate for Ranger, but on rate for the rest of kind of Flesh and Blood right now in terms of like, the math and the quantitative values.
Yeah, I think every class got at least one. Heatseeker is that for Ranger. I think that is the strict upgrade. It's BIOS update for Mech. It's I think everyone basically did. But yeah, this is not the set of upgrades. This is the set of design principles and where you can differentiating the archetypes of the heroes, which is what we wanted. But yeah, like you say, maybe I would have expected if anyone was going to get it, I would have thought it'd be Ranger for upgrades, but it actually looks like Mech got the most upgrades. So
yeah, small anecdote is that Matt Rogers at the end of the tournament, the end of the Worlds tournament, I kid you not, quote directly from his mouth, is he said that LSS doesn't want Mech to be good. And he ate his words in a good way because Mech is freaking great now.
Does seem so. But in the comments, let us know, prove us wrong if you think that we have kind of missed the mark on this one. We're going to postpone Wizard to next week. We're going to go through 6 classes next week. And so, Brendan, you have to wait another week to talk about Wizard. I'll let you stew on your thoughts around Brainstorm and, all these saps and all these cards.
Yeah, it's funny because I think the TLDR on Wizard, we're going to get into it later, but there's a lot to talk about. But the coolest thing for Wizard is that you got so many of these like 0 for 3 effects, and then at blue, the 0 for 1 effects. Like, that's probably not going to get a lot of people listening to this excited, but if you play Wizard and if you've played Combo Wizard, that's exciting. And potentially this like burn tempo Wizard, which we'll talk about
because it's very exciting.
Yeah.
Okay, Brendan, we're going to sign off for the week. I want to say a big thank you again to everyone for listening. This has been our part 1 of our Dynasty and Constructed pod. We are going to go through the remaining 6 classes next week. We've covered Warrior, Mechanologist, Ranger, Brute. So all the big classes, of course, in the game, all the ones that are prominent at the top of the game. Next week, we do all the B classes. So that's going to be... We'll, of course, also be talking about Assassin, which I'm sure we'll be spending some time on. If you do want to follow us on Twitter, me and Brendan are over there on Fab Twitter at Brendan APG and Fian_Dale. Come and get involved in the Fab discourse. Marathon, that's all happening in February. In the show notes down below, if you're on YouTube, even if you're on actually Spotify, they're going to be there as well. So you can see the links and stuff to that posted up. And a big thanks to all of our patrons. And do go and check out the Arsenal Pass YouTube channel. We're just at 5k subs, and we've got a few more videos heading up in the next week or so, including that Chandler Toe deck tech that has gone up. Brendan, till next week. See you next time.